Okay, hi everyone. I'm Alexis Williams, co-founder of Business Skills for Health Professionals, and welcome to the Beyond Clinical podcast. Today, I'll be interviewing health professionals from diverse backgrounds who've moved into unconventional roles. We'll be hearing their stories and tips and hope that this inspires you to pursue unique career paths. This is episode 23 of the podcast, and I'd like to introduce my guest, Jen Ongtone. Jen, can you say hello to everyone?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me, Alexis.
Yeah, super excited to have you. I just want to share a little bit about your background before we jump into our questions. So, Jen is a registered dietitian at the Canadian Produce Marketing Association and champions the Half Your Plate program, a healthy living initiative that encourages Canadians to fill half their plates with fruits and veggies. As part of her role, she develops nutrition resources for consumers, dietitians, and the produce industry, and provides continuing education opportunities for health professionals. With over 10 years of experience in the food industry, she supports the produce industry in ensuring their labels are compliant with Canadian labeling regulations. And Jen and I actually go back to working together in a large food retailer role that we held together at the same time. So that's how we got to know each other. So it's nice to see you again, and I'm excited to talk to you and learn more.
Yeah, great to be here, and it's great to reconnect again as well.
Yeah, for sure. So I like to start with kind of a fun, unrelated question, a lighter question. The one I've been asking this season is about your favorite podcasts. I don't know if you actually like podcasts. So if you do you have any favorites at the moment?
Yeah, it's interesting you ask that. I tend to kind of go like in and out of podcasts depending on how I feel. But I'm really drawn to lifestyle kind of podcasts, and I really like Dr. Becky's Good Inside podcast.
Oh,
She's
yeah.
a child psychologist from New York and provides really great parenting tips. So when you're managing work and life at home with littles, I really get some really good learnings from her, and she normalizes a lot of what we're feeling. So I've been really liking that parenting podcast at the moment.
Yeah, I've actually read her book and I joined her membership for a brief period of time. It was lots of great resources there. So, yeah, that's a great podcast. That's awesome. So, yeah, my first question is really just kind of diving into your origin story and your career journey. If you want to share that?
Sure. Yeah. So when I was a little girl, I had never known about the field of dietetics. I grew up in a household with traditional values around, what your profession's going to be. So, from a young age, I thought I was actually going to become an accountant and follow my dad's
Mm.
footsteps and take over his practice. And eventually, when I got into university and was taking accounting courses, I said, I don't think this is for me. So I decided to shift gears and think about, what other areas in the commerce field would interest me. And I was really drawn to marketing because I love that creative side of things and decided to
Hmm.
pursue that. And so I finished off that degree, but during that time, I also went through a little bit of an incident where a family member of mine got sick and got exposed to meeting a dietitian for the first time in the hospital.
Mm.
And I had no idea what this role was about, but all I knew is that I absolutely loved what she did. And it was so
Mm.
exciting to be talking about food, nutrition, getting people healthier. So, after some of those interactions, it kind of started to make me think a little bit more about what I wanted to do in my life and where my values really lied. And I decided to actually, after getting my marketing degree, to go back to school and to get all my prerequisites done. I was in a commerce field at the time, so had to
Mm.
do all of my basic sciences again, and eventually completed my dietetic degree after learning a little bit more about the program and doing some research and speaking to some friends who were in it as well. So after getting my dietetic degree, I worked in Quebec for a little bit for a couple of different gyms and for a food allergy association at the time. And shortly after that, there was an opening for a major retailer job in Ottawa. And that's where Alexis, you and I met. And it was a great opportunity to, go there and be part of this new innovative program, for the country and, working as a retail dietitian and looking back at it, I think I gained a lot of skills in that role with the public in general and really understanding, what are some common challenges, what are some of the practical tips that people are looking for. And I always valued my time in the grocery store, especially doing those grocery tours. I found like super helpful. So I worked in that field for a little bit and eventually took on a role with that retailer to manage our fee for service program for our group of dietitians. So at the time, our program was offering free services, and we decided to transition to a fee for service program. So I managed that program. And then shortly after that, I I decided to, oh, I actually shortly after that I went on mat leave and had my first child. And then coming out of it, I saw a new role for a dietitian at the Canadian Produce Marketing Association, CPMA, and read the job description, and it was all about, you know, um, national promotion of fruits and vegetables. And I think that's just like a dietitian's dream. So I was
Mm-hmm.
really excited to see this. It was actually an organization when I was thinking about, hey, where did I want to work next? I was thinking of contacting. So um, got offered the job eventually, and I've been working for CPMA for almost 5 years now.
Wow. That's exciting. I didn't realize it had been that long. Time flies, that's for sure. It's really
Yeah.
interesting, like hearing about your marketing background and, even the accounting and kind of how that led to the path that you're on today, which is kind of interesting. Do you think there's anything, whether it's related to that or not, that has kind of stood out to you that's contributed to your success in like a non-traditional role or maybe like even some of the business aspects of your role?
Yeah, I definitely think that, like my background in marketing, at the time I wasn't sure how handy it would come in, when I decided to kind of shift gears and go into dietetics. But it's really supported me in all of my roles.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like it's provided a really good foundation for how to look at your practice and looking at the bigger picture and really strategizing, hey, is it really worth doing this? What's kind of
Mm-hmm.
like the return on investment if I were to do this? So it's really helped me in my role as well. And yeah, it's definitely come in handy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one thing that just kind of came into my mind when you were talking about the value of marketing is I think sometimes we don't realize as health professionals how similar it is to kind of working with a client. Like at the end of the day, we're trying to solve a problem, whether we're in marketing, we're trying to solve a customer problem, but if we're in maybe a more traditional nutrition role, we're trying to help a client solve maybe a nutritional challenge that they're having. And there's a lot of similarities and skills that can be applied there, like customer centricity and client-centered care. So yeah, I can really see the connection there.
Yeah, and I think what's really great is like in my role right now as a dietitian with CPMA and Half Your Plate, I really get to use both
Mm-hmm.
degrees and really get to apply it in my role. So to give you a little bit more insight into my role, I get asked all the time, like, "Oh, Jen, like, what do you do?" And I'm really grateful for the opportunity here to kind of share that. But I CPMA, like our staff, like we're a smaller staff. It's a not-for-profit association. So what
Mm-hmm.
happens oftentimes in that kind of role is you end up wearing many different hats.
Mm-hmm.
So I do a lot of the consumer promotion and health profession education around fruit and vegetable consumption and Half Your Plate and our Half Your Plate program. And it really entails like looking over our website, social media, planning out, events for health professionals. So we actually also have like a health professionals network that's free to join. And we provide, the latest fruit and vegetable resources and events for dietitians as well. which is really great. But what other people don't know about is I also support our industry, the produce industry, when it comes down to their produce labels. So
Mm-hmm.
ensuring they're compliant with the Canadian labeling regulations. So I support our industry there, and whenever there's also issues related to labeling. We also have a government relations team that I work with, and we get to also, have meetings regularly with agencies like the Canadian Food Inspection Agency to help resolve them for our industry as well.
That's really cool. So you're kind of learning, or you've had to learn regulatory nutrition skills when it comes to like that very technical aspect too.
Yeah, absolutely. It was part of my job that, I wasn't, you have basic knowledge of, as a
Mm-hmm.
dietitian, the nutrition facts table. When I worked in
Mm-hmm.
the Allergy Association, I understood a little bit more about allergen labeling and, working in the grocery store, you understand a little bit more about the nutrition claims, but there was a whole aspect of it of regulatory requirements on a label but beyond the nutrition side of things that I was that I learned, and I'm glad I'm a very detail oriented person because
Mm-hmm.
looking at regulations is really it can be a really tough skill. But I had a great person train me when I first started, and have taken some regulatory courses, as well to help keep up to date with whenever there's changes. And it's some people, it's kind of like the running joke that labeling is, oh, it's another labeling issue. It's kind of dry, but it's such an important part to the business as well because it can
Mm-hmm.
have huge financial repercussions. So
Mm-hmm.
it's one that's really important for any business as well.
Well, and I think it's such a skill that dietitians can really hone and learn and become really strong experts in. And I know I've interviewed other dietitians working in regulatory on the podcast
Hmm.
before, and you're right, like it's a detail-oriented skill set. So if you're not detail-oriented, that may not be the place you want to pursue. But I think what's interesting too, like you said about working in a small association, not for profit, like you do have to wear many hats.
Hmm.
And in some ways, that could be really positive, I'm sure, because you get a lot of variety. And, there's probably not a lot of opportunity to get stuck doing one thing. But, that's also challenging in some ways too, I'm sure. Um, but yeah, so
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, like I'd say like it's also like it's like part of the reason why I love my job is because
Yeah.
there's so much diversity. It's not like, okay, you're working on the same file every single day or you're working with the same patient population, same
Hmm.
diseases. It's like every day is so different.
Hmm.
I could be one day like in a field with a group of dietitians learning all about like how to grow like lettuce, and then
Hmm.
another day, speaking to our members and supporting them on, what they need to change in their labels to be compliant with the industry, or another day just overseeing our different marketing campaigns that we have going on with Half Your Plate. So
Yeah.
it definitely keeps things interesting. You got to be very organized, I have to say, for a role like mine because
Yeah.
you're juggling so many different things, but it definitely keeps you motivated and wanting to do more.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. I'm sure a lot of project management skills are needed for a role like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I'm often working with a lot of different staff members. We have our marketing manager, our communications manager, the government relations team as well. So
Hmm.
managing the budget, keeping track of metrics and things like that. So yeah, lots of project management in this role as well.
That's great. So, what have been the role of mentors, coaches, or community kind of on your career journey, would you say?
Yeah, like I think I've been fortunate to have met some, really great dietitians, and I think also peers along my
Hmm.
career journey. Early on in my career, I learned a lot from I'd say Helene Charlebois, who you may be familiar with. She's a
Hmm.
mature dietitian who runs a very successful private practice. And when I moved to Ottawa, I joined a committee here to try and run events for dietitians in Ottawa, and she was leading it at the time, and got a lot of great learnings from her, and it was really nice to see her, mentor like the next generation as well. So
Hmm.
I've learned a lot through Helene, and yeah, I've also had some really unique opportunities to just meet other people and who work in areas that I had an interest in, and just wanted to have like a quick little chat with, and have just continued conversations there. Um, and I think it's also really important for us also as dietitians to be open to learning from people in other fields, like outside of dietetics, because, with the way that our organization is set up, I have constant interaction with our government relations team, and advocacy and nutrition advocacy is an area you don't really get taught in school. And being able to learn from your peers about effective strategies when working with the government, or about,
Hmm.
what are some good things to do when you're looking for policy change. I think it's been really amazing, like learning from my peers as well about, some of these areas as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's great. Yeah. Lots of new skills along the way and from different sources, like you said. Did you feel like you ran against any gaps in knowledge kind of when moving maybe from more traditional nutrition roles to like where you are today?
Yeah, like I think like at the beginning, the regulatory side, like I mentioned, was a
Yeah.
little bit more challenging, required me to really, understand the regulations, and which is really drawn out in very kind of lawyer talk, to so to
Hmm.
speak. So trying to navigate that was a bit of a challenge, but something that, I became better and more confident at with time and with training.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and I think just in general, like in terms of gaps, is, going back to like my marketing background and really remembering, okay, like this is how it's applicable to my role now, and
Hmm.
kind of honing in on those skills from the past.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great when we can kind of reflect back and pull from different areas of our education to help us in the current state. So, what do you love most about what you're doing now?
I really, to be honest, I really love the consumer marketing point of it.
Hmm.
It's, I think it's just such a great commodity to be representing fruits and vegetables. I mean, it's, I think every dietitian's favorite food, right? It's just,
Yeah.
and there's so much variety, and like the people behind it, like when you meet the produce industry, they're just such passionate people
Hmm.
who truly, not only grow the food, but really want to help the community. So I really love I really love the industry. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. What types of courses or programs do you currently do to kind of develop your skills? Is there anything you have on your radar right now?
Yeah, I'm always looking at um, courses or webinars related to marketing. And,
Hmm.
you know, marketing has changed so much from when I was back in school to what's out there
Yeah.
now. Like back then, like social media really wasn't a thing, or it was just starting. Like I think Facebook had just like come out during that time, and it's really exploded. So now whenever there's courses on SEO optimization, or, how to optimize websites or social media, and working with influencers, those are the types of courses that I like taking to kind of enhance my skills on. Um, and also like trends as well, like keeping up with the
Hmm.
trends, especially when you're working in the industry, what's new and upcoming, what are consumers looking for, and it's constantly evolving. And
Hmm.
we recently hosted a webinar looking for dietitians, looking at Gen Z and their values. And
Oh.
it's really interesting to kind of see like how the values of like the younger generation are shifting, and how we as health professionals, need to shift also our our training and also like how we counsel with this younger generation as well.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting because I think you're right. Like marketing is probably one of those things that is so ever changing, and
Hmm.
there's always new things coming down the pipeline, and you really have to kind of stay on top of it. Like, a couple of years ago, I was also getting really into SEO and blogging and websites, and now it's like the impact of AI and how do we leverage that in our
Hmm.
business strategy. So yeah, it's a really interesting space, and a lot of I think micro learning opportunities can really be helpful
Hmm.
rather than like maybe pursuing a degree in marketing, but maybe taking advantage of webinars and courses and things that are available. Um, I think on a smaller scale and specific to like an area you want to learn about, which is really cool.
Yeah, like I think what's nice now is like we're such a digital world and there's so
Hmm.
many like digital learning opportunities nowadays that are, there's obviously some that you need to pay for, but there's also a lot
Yeah,
of like free workshops that are really great to just sit in
yeah,
on nowadays. So yeah, looking at those is really valuable as well.
for sure. So if there's one thing that you could share with kind of your new grad self or your early career self, what would that be?
Yeah, I think I would go back to myself and say not to be scared to step outside your comfort zone
Hmm.
because the field of dietetics, it's very different from what you're taught in school. Like it's when I went to school, it was more like traditional fields of working in the hospital and working in food
Mm.
service. And now with, technology, there's so many opportunities that are available for dietitians. So being open and, not being scared also to approach organizations and really try to sell yourself in terms of the value that you can bring. I think there's a lot of skills that dietitians can bring to many different associations, and sometimes we don't give ourselves enough credit for it. And
Hmm.
being able to show the value that we can bring to that organization, I think is really instrumental as well.
Yeah, that's a really, I think, great piece of advice is to maybe start looking at companies in kind of the food and health sector. And if you want to create a role for yourself, like being creative and reaching out and making connections, because sometimes, yeah, you're right, like companies don't know the value until you help them see it, that you could bring to their organization. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I even see it too with like even for the work that I do with Half Your Plate and the nutrition communications standpoint and being able to review like all the nutrition content that we put out and it be like from an evidence-based stance
Hmm.
as opposed to, hey, if we had like a social media company doing it and
Hmm.
we've worked with some before and constantly having to edit it because it's
Yeah.
not always factual. So yeah, I think like our skill set in terms of evidence-based nutrition research and communications is really handy in a lot of
Hmm.
roles, like with the food industry as well.
Yeah, and just even like the creation of quality programs and services. So, if there's like companies wanting to be startups in like health technology space, I think having that credibility to your new app or your new program,
Hmm.
really can go a long way to build consumer confidence. So, yeah, that's a good one. Any kind of final advice for the listeners on pursuing a career beyond clinical?
Yeah, I think, like I said, it's a very exciting time for dietitians with all the advances in technology, opportunities working for startups. Even I was I came across a job posting the other day where even integrating AI, where they were looking for nutrition editors to kind of review
Mm.
what AI was putting out with nutrition communication. So I thought, hey,
Mm.
that's really interesting. So.
Hmm.
Um, Not to be scared to like step outside your comfort zone. Understand that, there's lots of transferable skills that can go to a new role. And I think one of the biggest things too that can come in handy um, and I try to tell others this who've come to me for advice, but really not being scared to also approach other people who are in roles that you're interested in and just
Hmm.
asking for a 15-minute chat or 15 going out for a little coffee and really just getting that opportunity to hear that story because you never know, the
Hmm.
types of connections those people can have. So um yeah, being open to opening your network as well.
Yeah, I think that's really important is kind of like you said, like making those connections at, when you see people working in cool places that you're interested in. And even if there's companies you have on your radar, making a connection to someone at the company it's a really
Hmm.
great strategy for finding opportunities that may not be posted. So that's great. Awesome. So I'm going to wrap it up and just hoping that everyone enjoyed hearing from Jen today and you're feeling inspired. I'm just going to tell you about two things that I can help you with if you're a health professional wanting to make a career transition to something new. I have my Beyond Clinical Career Transition program, and that's for people trying to kind of transition into something outside of clinical. And then I also have a community of dietitians who are working in non-traditional roles. It's a network and membership program, and we meet usually once a month and kind of strategize and figure out, solve problems together in a small group setting. So that's also an opportunity. I'll link them both in the show notes. So yeah, thank you so much, Jen, for your time and sharing your story with us. I hope you have a great rest of 2024.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Alexis.
Awesome. Bye, everyone.